Awesome. Huge thanks to our last speakers. For anybody in the audience that's thinking about starting your own blockchain startup or your own DAO, definitely be sure to listen up to this next talk because we've got Rebecca from Fenwick and West talking about what is a partnership and why isn't my DAO one? Please give a round of applause.
Thanks, everybody, for coming out on a Friday afternoon to listen to a lawyer talk. And welcome from the past to everybody who's watching this later on X. My name is Rebecca Matsumura. I'm an associate attorney at Fenwick and West. Work exclusively in the crypto space, helping crypto companies with everything from token launches all the way through, getting in trouble or almost getting in trouble with the government or with each other. So really happy to be here today and to talk through this very important topic for all of us who participate in DAO governance. Got to give a standard disclaimer. I am a lawyer. I am not your lawyer. This is not legal advice. You should get your own lawyer if anything that I say today concerns you. And I also have to give a special shout out to my colleague, Matthew Diamond, who helped put together today's slides. So first, and I promise this is the last time that you will see a lot of text on the screen, and the only real legalese that I'm going to use is in the next couple of minutes. But what is a partnership legally? A partnership is two or more people carrying on a business for profit, and sometimes not for profit too. An important thing to keep in mind about the types of legal risks that I'm talking about today is that these are creatures of state law. They're not federal law. This has nothing to do with whether or not a token is a security or any of the other things that we sometimes talk about or hope that the Trump administration will fix. There's not a lot that the Trump administration or anybody in the federal government can do to kind of affect the risks I'm talking about here, which arise under each state's law and would require a state-by-state approach to change. So a partnership is the default treatment for any kind of activity coordinated by human beings that meets basically these two prongs. Again, because it's state law, it may vary a little bit depending on what state you're on, but this is going to be the default treatment here. And that's the point that I want you to take away from this, right, is that if you take no action and you're carrying on a business and you're two or more people, you might be a partnership. And for the reasons that I'm going to discuss in a minute, it's not something that you want to stumble into an accident because it has really important legal consequences. So what are those legal consequences? This is the part where I scare everybody. So the biggest risk of being treated as a general partnership is that under state law, you can have what's called joint and several liability. I promise this is the last time I'm using legalese. Joint and several liability means that in a general partnership, each partner can be liable for the full amount of any liabilities created by any other partner in pursuit of the partnership. So what does that mean? Maybe kind of a regular, non-crypto example first, and then I'll bring it back home. So let's say Alice and Bob have a general partnership where they run a bingo parlor. And Bob forgets to mop the floors, and somebody slips and falls, and they sue the partnership to get, their medical expenses, pain and suffering. They were very embarrassed, all of those things. Americans love to sue. Bob may not care, right? Maybe Bob lost all his money in meme coins, and he's like, come after me. I'm what they call judgment-proof. But poor Alice could lose all of her ETH, right? Because even though she's not the one who didn't mop the floors, every partner is going to be liable for every other partner's liabilities. And it gets worse, guys. It's not just liability for the partnership's liabilities, but because the partnership doesn't have its own segregated assets, they can go after Alice's personal assets, right? She could lose her house. She could lose all of her ETH. She could lose kind of her own personal income if the damage was that severe. You might see something like this in a crypto context. For example, if there are people who hold keys to a multi-sig that has assets in it, right? And say there's just multiple people, uncoordinated, no legal entities involved, they're all holding the multi-sigs. Multi-sig gets hacked, multi-sig gets drained, right? Someone who lost money in that hack could come after the partnership, or they could just pick the richest person who held the multi-sig and go after them for the full measure of their damages, right? So this can be very scary. There are also tax consequences that arise from partnerships, which I won't get into in too much detail, other than to say, if you accidentally find yourself in a general partnership that makes money, you should definitely make sure you have a good accountant, because it's going to get messy. One more scary slide. These are not theoretical risks. There have already been a couple of courts that have considered these issues of whether DAOs could be treated as general partnerships under state law. And in both cases where this has been considered, the court said, yep, you betcha, general partnership. So was the issue. This was the kind of legal issue in the case that recently came down regarding Lido DAO, which you may have heard about. It's also the same issue that arose in the Uki DAO case, right, where the CFTC sued Uki DAO as a general partnership. And in both of those cases, the courts applying California law held that all of the members of the DAO who participated in governance could be considered partners in a general partnership. So in the Uki DAO case, nobody showed up to defend the DAO, so the CFTC got what's called a default judgment, which is where nobody comes to court to defend, and they got a default judgment in the amount of about $600,000. As of yet, we don't know of any efforts by the government to collect that money, but in theory, they could go after any governance token holder in Uki DAO to get the full amount of the $600,000. And then it would be up to that person who paid the judgment to then go after the other partners to try to get repaid. This is not a situation that you want to be in. All right, now that everybody is good and scared, let's talk about what we can do to address these risks. So the risk of joint and several liability and of being treated as a general partnership is fundamentally the reason why kind of normal corporations and normal organizations running businesses incorporate. Right? This is why we have LLCs. This is why we have corporations. This is why we have LLPs. This was like one of the fundamental reasons why this legal structure was developed, was to provide an entity that could hold its own assets so that if someone gets injured in the business, the person who's hurt goes after the assets of that business and not of every individual partner in their personal capacity. Now, for those of y'all who participate in DAOs know that that's not a good solution for DAOs, right? We can't just incorporate the DAO necessarily. We can't just set up a legal entity that is the DAO. But the first kind of solution that I'll offer you guys that a lot of folks use in this area is what we call a DAO wrapper. And the idea is to be an analog to that incorporation, right? So many of you who participate may hear about having a foundation, right? Whether it's a Cayman Foundation or a DUNA out of Wyoming, once one of those gets set up, or from some other overseas jurisdiction. And folks often wonder, like, what is the point of this? What is the foundation doing, right? And one of the purposes that a foundation might have, depending on the way it's set up, is it might provide a liability shield, right? So that it could step up in court if the DAO gets sued and say, no, it's not a general partnership. I'm the foundation. I'm responsible for all of the liabilities. The theory's never been tested in court, so we don't know that it will necessarily hold up, but that's kind of one of the strategies here. Another strategy that we use to protect people who are participating in governance or holding multi-sig keys or doing other types of activities that could result in partnership liability is what we call the REBA. This is a product that Fenwick offers that provides insurance for token holders. You can read more about the one we set up for Arbitrum DAO. And in that case, the policy covers anybody who participates in governance, who votes their tokens, who takes those actions, to the extent they're liable for that. So then if somebody goes after you as the representative of the DAO as a general partnership, you at least have some insurance that can help you hire a lawyer or pay the damages and kind of get some coverage on that end. The final thought I want to leave folks with, though, is that all of these are imperfect solutions, and the kind of legal structuring and the way courts are going to treat this is being worked out in real time. But another thing you might think about if you're someone who has significant risk in this area is how are you arranging your own assets? Right? Do you keep everything in the same bank accounts? Do you have some trusts that handle things? Do you have your own kind of entity that can do some of this business? Obviously, you want to get legal counsel involved, but if you have significant kind of exposure here, you want to also think about how, even if I get sued as a general partner, it's not me they're suing, but maybe it's my LLC, and they're limited to the recovery to the assets that are in that LLC, right? Thank you guys again so much for coming here today and hearing about these legal topics. My final slide has some Twitter accounts where you can find me. I'll be around after this, and it was really lovely to speak with everybody today and learn about the kind of risks and ways to mitigate a partnership risk for DAOs. Thank you.